For over 15 years, the Burj Khalifa has stood unchallenged as the tallest building on Earth. But what if it was never meant to be? Throughout history, architecture engineers have dreamed of structures that would make today's tallest skyscrapers look tiny in comparison. Imagine looking up and seeing a building 10 times taller than the Burj Khalifa. From the first skyscraper that could soon break the 1000 meter mark to a megastructure taller than Mount Everest itself. Here's our 3D comparison of the tallest buildings ever proposed. Hey, I'm Luis, this is my second video on MegaBuilds, and in case you haven't seen the first one where I introduce myself, I will link it in the end screen. But now let's jump right into our size comparison. And we start off with the Oblisco Capitale, a planned megatall skyscraper that will have a mind-boggling height of 1000 meters or 3280 feet. It's supposed to be the centerpiece of Egypt's new capital district, which has been under construction since 2015. The design of the skyscraper is inspired by obelisks, which are an iconic symbol in the ancient Egyptian culture. Another interesting feature is its facade, which will make use of rotating horizontal slats that change position depending on the angle of the sun to reduce heat. The project has already been approved by the Egyptian government and they hope to complete it by 2030. However, as of 2025, construction still not has begun and there hasn't been any news on when it might actually break ground. Also in the Middle East, we have the Burj Mubarak Al Kabir at 1001 meters. Similar to the previously mentioned Oblisco Capitale, this one is also meant to be the main attraction to a new planned district. It's supposed to be located just north of Kuwait's capital, across Kuwait Bay. As a nod to the rich culture of the Middle East, the skyscraper's height is inspired by the iconic 1001 Nights. When it comes to the design, it will have 3 interlocking towers that work together to support the entire structure from strong winds. There will also be mechanical flaps along the side that will further help with stability. The skyscraper was initially estimated to be completed in 2016 with a budget of more than $7 billion. But almost a decade later, and nothing has been built so far. The planned city around it still remains as nothing but highways headed to absolutely nowhere at all. And it seems like it will remain that way, at least in the near future. Speaking of roads that lead to absolutely nowhere, this next skyscraper suffered a similar fate. This is the 1050 meter Azerbaijan Tower. A mega project that also aimed to become the very first 1 kilometer structure in the world. The skyscraper was supposed to be the centerpiece of a luxury island development known as the Khazar Islands, Azerbaijan's version of Dubai's famous yet controversial Palm and World Islands. These were also created in order to diversify the country's economy away from oil. But following the arrest of its creator and the dwindling economy of Azerbaijan, the project was ultimately cancelled. And to this day, the site for the Khazar Islands remains unfinished, if not outright completely abandoned. Up next we have the Bionic Tower, a jaw-dropping proposal reaching 1228 meters or over 4000 feet into the sky. Designed as a self-sustaining vertical city, this futuristic skyscraper could house up to 100,000 people. As the name suggests, the architects took inspiration from bionics, a field of engineering that applies principles from nature to create innovative designs. Unlike traditional skyscrapers that rely on deep vertical foundations, the Bionic Tower's support system mimics tree roots, spreading out to anchor the structure more efficiently. The building features an oval-shaped design and is divided into 12 neighborhoods, each separated by air cushion-like gaps that help regulate airflow and reduce wind pressure on the exterior. Thanks to these design choices, the Bionic Tower's maximum sway is estimated to be just 2.45 meters. For context, that's about 66% more than the Burj Khalifa, which might sound like a lot, but for a structure this tall, it's actually quite impressive and would be reasonable. Going even taller on this list, we have the Dubai Creek Tower, which was originally planned to be 1300 meters or 4265 feet tall. Although technically not a skyscraper, it would still by far become the tallest man-made structure if it were ever built, beating out Dubai's very own Burj Khalifa by almost 500 meters. Out of all the skyscrapers that have been mentioned so far, the Dubai Creek Tower is the only one that has actually already begun construction. Work on the project began in 2016, and they've even managed to complete the structure's foundations just 2 years later. But for multiple reasons that we could only speculate on, and because of the COVID-19 pandemic, work on the project has been indefinitely paused since then. 6 years later, in 2024, they announced that the project was now back on track, but with some very significant changes. The most notable one being that the tower was no longer to be 1,300 meters tall. In fact, it isn't even going to be taller than the Burj Khalifa now, leaving the next skyscraper on this list as potentially one of the most promising candidates to become the very first 1 kilometer structure in the world. This is the 1,600 meter Jeddah Tower. A skyscraper that, despite still being unfinished, already has a bit of history behind it. We're putting it at 1,600 meters on this list because that's how tall it was originally planned to be. But we don't really know exactly what its height is gonna be, as they are purposely keeping it a secret from the public. Interestingly, the Jeddah Tower is being designed by a man who is no stranger when it comes to designing some of the tallest skyscrapers in the world. Because it is Adrian Smith, the same architect behind the one and only Burj Khalifa in Dubai. Construction on the Jeddah Tower began back in 2013, and they've already made significant progress with around 1/3 of the main structure already complete. But similar to the Dubai Creek Tower, the project was also delayed for a couple of years, following the arrest of key individuals behind the development. As recently as January 2025, it was announced that the project had already resumed construction, and they're hoping to finish it within the next 4 or 5 years. We'll definitely keep an eye on it to see if there's any progress soon. We now breach the 1 mile barrier, with the Sky Mile Tower at 1,700 meters or over 5,500 feet. This concept skyscraper was planned to be built on an artificial archipelago in Tokyo Bay. The proposal was created as part of a bigger development called Next Tokyo, a futuristic waterfront project that's intended to adapt to the rising sea levels. Another idea behind it was for the artificial islands to become a buffer between Tokyo's coast and the open sea. All of this would then be connected by public transport. Back then, the plans called for monorails, water buses and even a hyperloop system across the entire bay. We start to get even more futuristic with this list as we head on to the Times Square 3015, a hypothetical megastructure that would be 1,733 meters or over 5,680 feet tall. This visionary proposal answers the question of what would it be like to live in New York City 1,000 years into the future. The idea behind it was to create an entire city, all contained within one self-sustaining building. It would be divided into 12 major modules, which each serve their own unique function. There would be plenty of housing, offices, malls, vertical farms, a football stadium and even an entire beach, a mountain range and a redwood forest. Basically, everything you ever need would be located all inside the building. This next skyscraper is a pretty interesting one. This is the Illinois. A 1,760 meter or 5,770 feet skyscraper that was conceived all the way back in 1957 by renowned American architect Frank Lloyd Wright. He believed that his proposal for a mile-high skyscraper would still have been possible despite the inferior construction technology at the time. One major design aspect of the Illinois that is still being used up to this day is the creation of a tripod design for a skyscraper's base. This triaxial footprint is the same concept that's used in other structures such as the CN Tower in Canada or of course the Burj Khalifa. And although constructing the Illinois didn't seem possible at the time, the ideas behind it have already inspired many people to develop new ways and create taller and taller buildings. Up next we have the Millennium Challenge Tower at 1,852 meters. Not much is actually known about this skyscraper, aside from the fact that it aims to reach a height of exactly 1 nautical mile. And they're planning on doing that without the use of traditional construction and engineering techniques. According to its creator, the structure wouldn't have any right angles and perpendicular planes. Instead, it would follow an unusual and twisted geometry, inspired by the way snowflakes form in nature. The skyscraper was proposed all the way back in 2005 and is planned to be built somewhere in Kuwait City. The architect behind the project has mentioned in the past that multiple investors had been interested in funding the skyscraper, but in the end there has never been any news surrounding its construction. We now reach the record-shattering height of 2000 meters, or over 6,500 feet, with the Dutch Mountain. And when we say the Dutch Mountain, we really mean it. The idea was originally brought up by a Dutch journalist as a joke, but also because of its absurdity, many people started to talk about it and even made rough plans. Although there have been many iterations, the general idea is that a hollow 2-kilometer tall mountain would be built just outside of Amsterdam. The megastructure would serve many different purposes, such as housing, recreation and tourism. It could even be used as a training facility for Dutch athletes in various alpine sports. The initial joke of a proposal has generated a lot of attention, but maybe not enough to actually build it. Maybe the next one will stand a better chance. The Jeddah Tower might still not be complete, but Saudi Arabia seems to be eager to create yet another, even taller skyscraper. And this time, it's going to be located in the kingdom's capital, Riyadh. This is the Rise Tower, which will rise to a mind-boggling height of 2000 meters, or more than 6,560 feet. Although you're seeing a 3D render of the skyscraper right now, this isn't actually how it's going to look like. In fact, nobody actually knows what it's going to look like just yet. In all the promotional material they have shown so far, the tower is only depicted as a featureless spire, with no discernible elements. So we had to get creative here and modeled our own. The Rise Tower is yet another one of Saudi Arabia's ambitious Vision 2030 developments. Around it, it's supposed to have everything you would expect of a futuristic Saudi mega project, including autonomous cars, air taxis and a fully renewable powered city. Well, Saudi Arabia isn't the only country coming up with skyscrapers of this scale. Japan had its time too. This is the Aeropolis 2001, one of Japan's many entries on this list. This mammoth of a structure would have been 2001 meters tall. Similar to the Sky Mile Tower, it would have also been built on an artificial island within Tokyo Bay. It was planned to house as much as 140,000 permanent residents, with a price tag of at least $380 billion. There have never been any concrete plans to build the structure, and it remains only as a showcase of the optimistic visions for the future that people had when it was first conceived back in 1989. Continuing with Japan's borderline absurd mega project proposals, we have the Shimizu Mega City Pyramid. At a height of 2004 meters, this behemoth would not only have been the tallest building in the world, it would also have been by far the largest man-made structure of any kind. What's most interesting about its design is that the pyramid wouldn't actually be a solid object. Instead, it would be composed of 204 smaller pyramids that would be stacked on top of each other to create the larger structure. There would also be countless 100-story skyscrapers that would be placed within the hollow areas inside each smaller pyramid. Because of its enormous size, this mega project just isn't possible. Conventional materials like concrete and steel would be too heavy, and the entire structure would collapse on itself. I mean, even if we could do it, the scale and amount of resources needed for this pyramid would be insane. If any place in the world has the land and resources to build what could be the next tallest skyscraper, Dubai is definitely one of the top contenders. After all, they have already proven that they could build higher than anyone else has ever done before. Enter the Dubai City Tower with a staggering height of 2,400 meters. Sometimes known as the Dubai Vertical City, it would have taken the concept of a self-sustaining city from Times Square 3015 quite literally to the next level. The structure will have a total of 400 floors, which will be divided into 4 district neighborhoods. Each segment of the structure will have its own downtown, just like any other normal city. The project was first proposed back in 2008, however it has never been heard of or mentioned by Dubai or any other credible news source since then. We finally arrive at the top 3 tallest buildings that have ever been proposed. This is the Ultima Tower, a 3,218 meter or exactly 2 miles tall skyscraper, which is the tallest building that has ever been planned for the United States. It was first proposed back in 1991 as a solution to the rapidly growing population of urban metro areas around the world. This single building would have been able to house more than 1 million people in a self-sustaining environment. An interesting aspect of the tower's design is that it's actually inspired by African termite nests, which is a great shape for both safety and stability. Before we get to the final 2 skyscrapers, I would appreciate it a lot if you'd subscribe. These animations always take longer than expected, and yeah, the same happened here as well. At the second spot on this list is the Exceed 4000. At 4000 meters or more than 13,100 feet, this visionary megastructure was first proposed and designed back in 1995. Its shape is a little similar to that of the Ultima Tower, but instead of termite nests, this skyscraper is intended to resemble Mount Fuji. Interestingly, if the Exceed 4000 were to ever be built, it would have actually been taller than the iconic mountain itself, making it the highest point in the entire country. One interesting consequence of building a structure this high is the fact that the higher floors of the Exceed 4000 would have had to be pressurized for people to not experience altitude sickness. And finally, at the top of our list is the single tallest building that has ever been proposed. This is the Tokyo Tower of Babel. With a dimension-bending height of 10,000 meters or over 32,000 feet, it would not only have been the tallest building in the world, it would have even been the tallest object on the planet's surface, beating out even Mount Everest by at least an entire kilometer. This structure would have been so unbelievably huge that the numbers used to describe it almost start to make no sense at all. Its estimated cost, for example, is $22 trillion, almost a quarter of the entire world's GDP. Could you imagine walking through your city and seeing one of these skyscrapers? And do you think any of them have a real chance of being completed? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. I'm excited to read them, and in case you haven't seen my first video, I will link it right here. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.